To hear the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to St. Luke. Jesus said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to the father, "Father, give me the share of property that falls to me." And he divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in loose living. And when he had spent everything, a great famine arose in that country, and he began to be in want. So he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to make merry. Now his elder son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked him what this meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Lo, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your living with harlots, you killed for him the fatted calf.' And Jesus said to him, and the man said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.' This is the gospel of the Lord." This has nothing to do with what I'm going to say, but it just suddenly struck me. You read this parable over and over and over again, and there's always something new in it. And I just suddenly struck me that the speech that the son had carefully rehearsed was only half delivered. The sports speech is, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." But as you look at it, he starts to say the first bit, and the father cuts him off before he says, "Treat me as one of your hired servants." Interesting, isn't it? Anyway, it's just a side, sorry. Well, if you read the Gospels, one of the things that you will notice is how many times Jesus clashes with the scribes and the Pharisees. They were, it's true to say, the absolute bane of his life. They were always taking every opportunity to challenge him or trip him up or condemn him or plot against him. They were really his enemies in that sense. And if we're honest as well, Jesus, in his turn, gave as good as he got, because he called them whited sepulchres, hypocrites, and worse still, children of the devil. So he could not only take punches, he could give them as well. And so the impression you get is that neither had much time for the other. And Jesus, as a result, seems to have spent most of his time with the least and the last and the lost. If the Pharisees are not going to listen to me, I'm going to go and I'm going to speak to everybody else. That's the impression you get. But that's not the whole story. And actually, the parable of the prodigal son gives us Jesus' insight into where, in fact, he stands. Now, there's little doubt as we read this that the younger son in the parable represents the lost souls that Jesus then gave himself to because the Pharisees wouldn't listen to him. While the elder son represents the scribes and the Pharisees. I think that's fairly straightforward, and commentators, almost to a person, would say that that's probably the way we should read it. And Jesus himself had already set up 2 preceding parables. He has told us that he is the shepherd who seeks the one lost sheep, leaving the 99 safe in the sheep pen. The lost sheep, of course, is the least, the last, and the lost. And he is also the woman who has lost one of her 10 coins and then sweeps the whole house until she finds it and puts it back in the purse with the other 9. And so when we come to the parable of the prodigal son, the wasteful younger son represents the lost humanity, the lost sheep, the lost coin, those who have turned away from God. And the elder son represents the faithful scribes and Pharisees who have stayed home, looking after the family business, as it were. And so when the lost son turns up and the father throws a party for him, then the elder son gets resentful, and he says, "Lo, these many years I've served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends." Now, in telling the parable and given the opposition Jesus had faced there with the scribes and Pharisees, you would expect, if Jesus is telling this story, that he'd take this opportunity to have a go at the scribes and Pharisees. That he would make the tone of the father, who is nice towards the lost son because he's lost, and harsh and scolding towards the one that would not welcome him, the elder brother. But that is not what we read. And this is where Jesus always trips us up, always catches us out. In fact, the father in the parable says to the elder son, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for your younger brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Here's Jesus, through the character of the father in the story, is giving actually a heartfelt message to the scribes and Pharisees, represented by the older son. First of all, he's acknowledging that even though they've got it terribly wrong in rejecting him as a Messiah, yet their general motives for keeping the law and obeying the commandments, looking after the Father's property, show that they are faithful. They're trying to stay faithful to God. They're getting things wrong, absolutely, but their general motive is they want to keep the commandments and they want to be faithful to God. And as a consequence, Jesus says, "You are always with me. You're the 9 coins, if you like. You're the 99 sheep. You're always with me." And secondly, he's assuring them that all the riches of God's blessing are theirs. He says, "All that is mine is yours. You've got it all. You've got it all." What is this all? Paul, in his letter to the Romans, chapter 9, makes this clear what this all means. Because he says about the Jews, he says they are God's people. They're the ones that he had chosen. He made them his children, and he revealed his glory to them. He gave them his covenants and the law. They have the true worship. They have received God's promises. They are descended from the famous Hebrew ancestors. All that I have mine is yours. You've got it all. Everything. What other people have received these promises and privileges? Nobody else on the face of the earth. And so they have been. And despite their waywardness, God still loves them. All that is his is still theirs, if they will take it, of course. And then thirdly, he's making his plea to them as they listen that the ones he has come to rescue and bring home are their own brothers and sisters. They are their own people. They belong to you. You are brothers. And therefore they should rejoice with God and the angels over everyone that's been lost but now has been found. And what's more, the work that Jesus was doing was actually, if they thought about it, in line with what they were doing. They wanted all the people to keep the commandments, all the people to worship at the temple, all the people to seek the righteousness of God. That's what they wanted. And Jesus is saying, we're on the same side. I want all of them to be one family. And then finally, and I think this is where the genius of Jesus comes in. The parable ends with an open. It's open. It's not closed. It's not the story hasn't ended. The story never ends. You and I live in a never-ending story. It doesn't end here on earth. It ends in heaven. The Father's and Jesus' last plea is left hanging in the air. It's as if he's saying to them that God's arms will always, always, always be open to them. Jesus never gave up on the scribes and Pharisees. We may think he did because of the animosity, but he never did. Although in some ways they were his enemies because they were opposed to him, he never stopped loving them every bit as much as everybody else. And towards the end of his life, as he looked down in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem represents everything the Pharisees and scribes stood for. There was the temple, there the Sanhedrin met, there were all the religious artifacts and everything that it was meant to be a Jew. As he looked down in Jerusalem, what did he do? Did he rant and he rail at it, shaking his fist because they turned his back at him? No. He wept. He wept. And he wept over it in love. And so when he went to the cross, it was not just the least and the last and the lost that were on his heart. It was the scribes and the Pharisees too. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that those who believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Do you know, we are the only ones who make divisions. They're them and they're us, and we're for and they're against, and we're the chosen people and they're not, whatever. We're the ones who make divisions, but when God looks on humanity, he sees it as one. One. And he loves every single last one of us. So it's a wonderful parable. And every year I think, what else can I get out of it? But every year he yields his treasures. That's the teaching of Jesus. The depths is